My name is Ethan, and at 28 years old, I finally achieved my dream of owning a brand new SUV after years of saving every penny. I still remember that new car smell when I drove it home just 2 weeks ago. But last Saturday, I woke up to empty space on my nightstand where my keys should have been. By the time I rushed outside, my parking spot was empty too. My brother Jake has always taken my things without asking, but I never imagined my new car would be gone within weeks of buying it. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy stories about family drama and justice served, hit that like button and subscribe to catch more real-life tales like mine. Growing up as the older brother to Jake was never easy. From day one, there was a strange dynamic in our family that I never quite understood until I was older. I was born when my parents were still struggling financially. They worked multiple jobs, lived in a tiny apartment, and had to count every dollar. By the time Jake came along 4 years later, things had improved. My dad got promoted, my mom found a better paying job, and we moved into our first actual house. Maybe that's why Jake and I had such different childhoods despite growing up in the same family. I was taught the value of money early. I started mowing lawns at 10, got my first real job at 16, working at a grocery store, and put myself through college with scholarships and part-time work. Jake, on the other hand, seemed to float through life with everything handed to him. "Ethan, you need to be more understanding with your brother," my mom would say. Whenever I complained about Jake borrowing my things without asking, "He looks up to you." Looking up to me apparently meant taking my video games and returning them scratched, borrowing my clothes and staining them, or using my laptop and somehow downloading enough viruses to require a complete system wipe. Each time my mom would make excuses for him, and my dad, who traveled constantly for work, was rarely around to mediate. After college, I moved out and got a job as a software engineer at a tech startup. The pay wasn't great at first, but I was good at what I did and worked my way up. I lived frugally in a small apartment, drove an old sedan that broke down at least once a month, and put most of my income into savings. My goal was always clear financial independence, and eventually my dream car. Jake, meanwhile, dropped out of community college after one semester. He moved back home where Mom continued to cook his meals, do his laundry, and give him money whenever he asked. He bounced between minimum wage jobs, never lasting more than a few months at any of them. Whenever I visited, he'd boast about his latest get-rich-quick scheme or complain about how his boss had it out for him. Last year, after getting a substantial promotion and bonus, I decided it was finally time to buy the car I'd been dreaming of for years. I spent months researching models, safety features, fuel efficiency, and resale value. I test drove dozens of vehicles before settling on a midnight blue Trailblazer SUV with all the premium features I'd always wanted: leather seats, sunroof, advanced driver assistance, and a state-of-the-art entertainment system. The day I drove it home was one of the proudest moments of my life. 7 years of hard work, careful saving, and patience had finally paid off. I texted a photo to my girlfriend Diana, who promised to come see it that weekend. Then I called my mom, hoping she'd be proud of what I'd accomplished. "That's nice, honey," she said, sounding distracted. "But don't you think it's a bit much? That money could have helped your brother get back on his feet." I bit my tongue. At 24, Jake should have been standing on his own 2 feet already. Instead, he was still living at home, still expecting everyone else to solve his problems. A week after I bought the car, Jake called me. We hadn't spoken in months, not since Christmas, when he'd asked to borrow $500 for a business opportunity that was definitely not a pyramid scheme. "Bro, that new ride of yours is sick," he exclaimed, without even saying hello. "Mom showed me the pictures. When are you bringing it over so I can check it out?" "Maybe next weekend," I said cautiously. "Sweet. Hey, do you think I could take it for a spin just around the block?" I remembered all too clearly what had happened when he'd borrowed our dad's vintage Mustang for just around the block. He'd returned it with a dented fender and a story about a parking meter that had come out of nowhere. "Sorry, Jake. The insurance only covers me right now," I lied, knowing he'd never accept a simple no. "Come on, man. It's not like I'm going to crash it or something." "We'll see," I said, which was my diplomatic way of saying absolutely not without triggering an argument. He hung up sounding annoyed, but I didn't think much of it. Jake was always annoyed when he didn't get his way. It was a pattern as familiar as his habit of taking without asking and breaking without apologizing. The following Friday, just 2 weeks after bringing home my new SUV, I stopped by my mom's house for dinner. Jake was there talking excitedly about a weekend trip he and his friends had planned to a lake cabin about 200 miles away. "It's going to be epic," he said, mouthful of my mom's lasagna. "Cody's uncle owns this awesome cabin right on the water. We're going to do some fishing, maybe some hiking, but mostly just chill and have some beers." "How are you getting there?" I asked, already feeling a twinge of suspicion. Jake shrugged. "We'll figure it out. Tyler might borrow his dad's van." I nodded, relieved. Tyler's dad was notorious for letting his son use their family van for weekend trips. I finished dinner, helped Mom with the dishes, and headed home completely unaware that in less than 12 hours my dream car would be gone. I arrived home from my mom's house around 9 that Friday evening, exhausted from a particularly challenging week at work. We'd been racing to meet a software release deadline, and I'd put in over 60 hours in just 5 days. All I wanted was to crash in my bed and sleep until noon the next day. Before heading upstairs to my apartment, I paused to admire my new SUV in the parking spot right outside my building. The midnight blue paint gleamed under the streetlights, and I felt that familiar surge of pride. I'd worked so hard for this. It represented every overtime hour, every brown bag lunch instead of takeout, every vacation I'd postponed. As I turned my key in the lock, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Jake mentioned he needs a ride to meet his friends tomorrow for their trip. I told him you might be able to help." I frowned at the screen. This was classic mom behavior, volunteering my time and resources without asking me first. I replied with a non-committal, "Already have plans tomorrow, sorry," and switched my phone to silent mode. Whatever transportation issues Jake had were not my problem. Inside my apartment, I followed my usual routine. I hung my keys on the hook by the door, changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, and heated up some leftover pizza. After eating, I realized I needed to charge my phone overnight, but had left my charger in the car. Grumbling at having to go back outside, I grabbed my keys and trudged down to retrieve it. Once back inside, I placed my keys on my nightstand where I always kept them, a habit from years of apartment living where I needed to have them handy in case of emergency. I plugged in my phone, set my alarm for 10 the next morning, and fell into a deep, exhaustion-induced sleep. The next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my blinds. I blinked groggily at my phone, 8:30 earlier than I'd planned to wake up. Something felt off, but in my still half-asleep state, I couldn't pinpoint what it was. I stretched, sat up, and reached for a glass of water on my nightstand. That's when I noticed. My keys weren't there. At first, I thought I must have put them somewhere else. Maybe I'd left them in my pants pocket, or on the kitchen counter. I searched the entire apartment, growing increasingly frantic as I checked and rechecked the same spots. "This makes no sense," I muttered to myself. "I know I put them right here." A cold feeling of dread began to spread through my chest. I hurried to the window and looked down at my parking spot. Empty. For several seconds, I just stood there, unable to process what I was seeing. My car. My brand new, barely driven dream car was gone. I ran outside in my pajamas as if seeing the empty spot up close would somehow change the reality. It didn't. Where my beautiful midnight blue SUV had been parked just hours before was nothing but a rectangular patch of bare asphalt. My first thought was theft. I rushed back upstairs to call the police, but as I reached for my phone, a memory flashed through my mind. Jake talking about his weekend trip, his vague answers about transportation, my mother's text about him needing a ride. No, I thought, he wouldn't. Even Jake wouldn't be that reckless, that entitled. But a sinking feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. With shaking hands, I pulled up the app connected to my building's security system. As a tech-savvy software engineer, I'd made sure to have access to the cameras that monitored the parking area. I scrolled through the footage from overnight, starting around midnight. At exactly 3:17 in the morning, the camera captured a familiar figure approaching my building. Jake, wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face. But still unmistakably, Jake entered the building using the code I'd given my mother for emergencies. The next camera showed him coming up to my floor, pausing outside my door, and then using what looked like a spare key to enter. My mother must have given him the spare key I'd left with her years ago. My hands clenched into fists as I continued watching. Less than 2 minutes later, Jake emerged from my apartment, my car keys dangling from his fingers. He looked directly at the camera, and even through the grainy footage I could see the smirk on his face. He knew exactly what he was doing. The footage continued, showing Jake casually walking down to the parking area, getting into my SUV and driving away like he owned it. I sat on my couch, stunned and furious. Jake had broken into my apartment while I slept and stolen my car. There was no other way to describe it. This wasn't borrowing. He hadn't asked permission. This was theft, plain and simple. I immediately tried calling his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again with the same result. Either his phone was off, or he was deliberately ignoring my calls. I sent text after text ranging from concerned to furious. Jake, where's my car? Call me immediately. I know you took my SUV. Bring it back now. This is not okay. You had no right to take my keys. No response. I called my mother next, my voice tight with controlled anger. Mom, is Jake with you? No, honey. He left early this morning to meet his friends for that lake trip. Why is something wrong? Did you give him the spare key to my apartment? I asked, ignoring her question. There was a pause, and I could practically hear her mind working to formulate an excuse. Well, he mentioned he needed to borrow something from you, and I knew you'd be sleeping in after your busy work week, so I thought, he stole my car, Mom, I interrupted. Jake broke into my apartment at 3 a.m, took my keys while I was asleep, and drove off with my brand new SUV. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sure he didn't steal it, Ethan, she finally said, her voice taking on that familiar defensive tone she always used when Jake was in trouble. He probably just borrowed it. You know how excited he was about that trip with his friends. He must have been desperate for transportation. I could feel my blood pressure rising. This was exactly why Jake had never learned to respect boundaries or take responsibility for his actions. Our mother was always there to justify excuse and enable his behavior. I have security footage of him breaking into my apartment and taking my keys without permission, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. That's not borrowing. That's stealing. Don't be so dramatic, she replied. He's your brother. I'm sure he'll bring it back in perfect condition on Sunday. You're always so possessive of your things, Ethan. Learn to share. I hung up without responding, knowing that continuing the conversation would only make me more upset. My mother would never see Jake's behavior for what it was. In her eyes, he could do no wrong, and I was always the unreasonable one for expecting basic respect and consideration. Sitting alone in my apartment, I stared at my phone, wondering what to do next. My car was gone, taken by my own brother, and there was no way to contact him. All I could do was wait and hope that when Jake returned, my SUV would still be in one piece. But deep down, I knew better. Jake had never taken care of anything in his life. Why would my car be any different? After hanging up with my mother, I paced around my apartment, too agitated to sit still. The more I thought about the situation, the angrier I became. Not just at Jake for taking my car, but at my mother for enabling his behavior for years. This pattern had been going on since we were kids, and at 28 years old, I was tired of it. I grabbed my wallet and phone, called an Uber, and headed to my mother's house. This wasn't a conversation I wanted to have over the phone. I needed to look her in the eye and make her understand how serious this was. 20 minutes later, I was knocking on her door, probably a bit harder than necessary. She opened it with a wary expression, already on the defensive. Ethan, I told you not to worry. Jake will bring the car back tomorrow. I brushed past her into the living room, pulling out my phone as I went. I want you to see something, I said, bringing up the security footage. This is your son breaking into my apartment at 3 a.m. to steal my car keys. She reluctantly took the phone, watching as Jake snuck into my building, used the spare key to enter my apartment, and left with my keys. Her expression remained frustratingly neutral. He shouldn't have gone in without asking, she admitted, handing the phone back to me. But I'm sure he just didn't want to wake you. You know how excited he was about this trip. I stared at her in disbelief. Mom, Do you hear yourself? He broke into my apartment while I was sleeping and took my keys without permission. He stole my car. I stared at her. Don't use that word, she snapped. Jake is your brother, not some criminal. He probably just needed it for an emergency. What emergency? His drinking weekend with friends. He's been planning this trip for at least a week. He could have asked me directly if he needed a ride. You would have said no, she pointed out. Yes, I would have. Because it's my car that I paid for. And Jake has a history of being irresponsible. Remember Dad's Mustang? Or my laptop? Or literally anything else Jake has ever borrowed? My mother sighed dramatically, sinking onto the couch. You've always been so hard on him, Ethan. Jake is still finding his way. Not everyone can be as rigid as you are. The word rigid stung. In my mother's vocabulary, it meant uptight, no fun, too serious. It was her way of making me feel bad for having boundaries and expectations. It's not rigid to expect people to respect your property, I countered. It's not rigid to be upset when someone steals your $35,000 vehicle that you worked for years to afford. It's just a car, she said dismissively. Family is more important. I felt something snap inside me. It's not just a car to me, Mom. It's everything I've worked for. It's every overtime hour, every promotion I fought for, every vacation I didn't take so I could save money. And Jake took it without a second thought because he knows you'll always defend him. That's not fair, she protested. No, what's not fair is that you've spent our entire lives making excuses for Jake. He's never had to face consequences for anything because you're always there to clean up his messes. He's had a harder time than you, she said, her voice rising. You've always been so independent, so capable. Jake needs more support. He needs boundaries. He needs to learn that he can't just take whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. He's 24 years old, Mom. When are you going to stop treating him like he's 12? My mother's face hardened. I won't sit here and be lectured about how to parent my own son. You've always been jealous of the attention I give Jake. I laughed bitterly. Jealous? I moved out as soon as I could to get away from this dysfunctional dynamic. I built my own life, made my own money, solved my own problems. Meanwhile, Jake is still living in his childhood bedroom, letting you do his laundry and make his meals. That's because he still needs me, she insisted. And right now you're being selfish and materialistic. It's just a car, Ethan. Jake will bring it back. I shook my head, realizing this conversation was going nowhere. My mother was too entrenched in her role as Jake's protector to see the situation clearly. I'm going to call the police and report my car stolen, I said, pulling out my phone again. That got her attention. She jumped up from the couch, eyes wide with alarm. You can't do that. They'll arrest him. Maybe that's what he needs. I replied, though the thought of my brother in handcuffs gave me no pleasure. Maybe he finally needs to face real consequences. Ethan, please. She begged, her anger giving way to fear. He could lose his job, get a criminal record. Is that what you want for your brother? What job? The one he got 2 weeks ago, and will probably quit in another 2 weeks. And no, I don't want him to have a criminal record. What I want is for him to grow up and stop taking things that don't belong to him. My mother grabbed my arm. Give him a chance to make this right. Wait until he comes back tomorrow. If there's any damage to the car, I'll help pay for it. I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, who had always loved Jake more, or at least differently. She looked older, suddenly worn down by years of managing Jake's chaos. Despite my anger, I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. She was trapped in a cycle of her own, making unable to see how her protection was actually harming Jake in the long run. Fine, I said finally. I'll wait until tomorrow. But if my car isn't back by noon, I'm calling the police. And this time, I won't let you talk me out of it. Relief flooded her face. Thank you, Ethan. I know Jake will make this right. I didn't share her confidence, but I was too exhausted to argue anymore. As I called another Uber to take me home, I wondered if Jake had any idea of the stress he was causing, or if he even cared. Probably not. In his mind, the world revolved around his wants and needs, and everyone else was just an accessory to his life. Back at my apartment, I tried calling Jake again, still straight to voicemail. I left a message this time, keeping my voice calm despite my anger. Jake, it's Ethan. I know you took my car. I've seen the security footage. I'm giving you until noon tomorrow to bring it back undamaged. After that, I'm reporting it stolen. This isn't a game, and I'm not letting Mom bail you out this time. As I hung up, I wondered if he would even listen to the message before tomorrow. Probably not. Jake had never been one to check his voicemail or respond to texts in a timely manner. All I could do now was wait and hope that for once in his life Jake would do the right thing. After returning from my mother's house, I tried to distract myself by catching up on work, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting to my car, where it might be, what Jake might be doing with it, whether I'd ever see it in one piece again. By mid-afternoon, the anxiety became unbearable. I decided to take action rather than just wait helplessly. Jake might be ignoring my calls, but his friends had parents who might be more responsible. I still had the contact information for Cody's mother from a family barbecue years ago. I called her first. Mrs. Matthews. This is Ethan, Jake's brother. Oh, Ethan. How are you, dear? It's been ages. I cut straight to the point. I'm trying to reach Jake. Do you know where Cody and the guys went for their weekend trip? They're at Cody's uncle's cabin at Pine Lake, she replied cheerfully. About 3 hours north near the state park. Is everything okay? Not really, I admitted. Jake took my car without permission, and I need to contact him urgently. Her tone changed immediately. Oh my, that doesn't sound like Jake. I bit back a sarcastic response. Of course it sounded like Jake. To anyone who actually knew him without my mother's rose-colored filter. Do you have the address of the cabin? I asked instead. I don't, I'm afraid. But I know it's on the east side of Pine Lake. There's not much cell service up there, which might be why you can't reach him. After thanking her, I hung up and considered my options. I could drive up there, but my car was gone, and renting one on a Saturday without advance booking would be difficult and expensive. I could wait until Sunday as planned, but the thought of Jake joyriding in my new SUV for another 24 hours made my stomach churn. I decided to try one more approach before taking more drastic measures. I called the local police department near Pine Lake. I'm trying to locate my vehicle, I explained to the officer who answered. My brother took it without permission and drove to a cabin at Pine Lake. I'm concerned about the vehicle's safety. Is this a stolen vehicle report, sir? The officer asked. I hesitated. Not officially. It was taken by a family member without permission. Ah, he said, his tone changing slightly. That's a civil matter then, not criminal. Family disputes over property are complicated. But he broke into my apartment to take the keys, I protested. Does he have a key to your apartment? My mother gave him her spare key. I see. And has he indicated he doesn't intend to return the vehicle? No. But then my suggestion would be to wait until your brother returns and handle this as a family matter. If the vehicle is not returned or is returned damaged, you can file a report at that time. I thanked him and hung up, frustrated but not surprised. The legal system had a blind spot when it came to family-related property disputes. To them, this was just a squabble between brothers, not a theft. As a last resort, I tried social media. Jake rarely posted himself, but his friends were constantly updating their profiles. Sure enough, Cody had posted a photo just an hour ago. A group of guys holding beer cans on a dock with a lake in the background. No sign of my SUV, but at least I knew they had arrived safely at the cabin. I sent direct messages to all 3 of Jake's friends who were tagged in the photo. Maybe one of them would have the decency to respond, even if Jake wouldn't. As evening approached, my girlfriend Diana called. We had plans for dinner, which I'd completely forgotten about in the chaos of the day. Hey, are we still on for tonight? She asked. I made a reservation at that Italian place you like. Diana, I'm so sorry, I said, then explained the situation with Jake in my car. That's terrible. Do you want me to come over? You shouldn't be alone right now. Her offer of support meant more than she could know. 30 minutes later, she arrived at my door with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. Any news, she asked as we sat down to eat. I shook my head. Nothing. His phone's still off and none of his friends have responded to my messages. Diana had met Jake several times and had witnessed firsthand the dynamic between him, my mother, and me. Unlike many outsiders who found Jake charming on first impression, Diana had quickly seen through his act. What are you going to do if he doesn't bring it back tomorrow, or if it's damaged? I have comprehensive insurance, I said. It should cover theft and damage, even if the driver isn't on my policy. But there's a deductible, and my rates will go up. Plus, it's the principle of the thing. He had no right to take it. Diana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. No, he didn't. And your mom had no right to give him access to your apartment. She'll never see it that way, I sighed. In her mind, we're still kids sharing toys, and I'm the selfish one for not letting Jake play with my things. Do you think we should drive up there? Diana suggested. I could rent a car. I considered it briefly, but shook my head. Pine Lake is huge, and we don't have the exact address. We could spend hours driving around, looking for the cabin. And honestly, what would I do if we found them, drag Jake out by his ear, get into a confrontation with him and his drunk friends? It's better to wait until they come back. So that's what we did. Diana stayed over a comforting presence as I alternated between simmering anger and anxious worry. We watched movies, ordered more food, and tried to keep my mind off the situation. But every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, hoping it was Jake finally responding. It never was. By Saturday night, I had checked every social media platform multiple times. Tyler had posted a few more photos. The group around a campfire fishing off the dock inside the cabin playing cards. In one photo, I caught a glimpse through a window of what might have been my SUV parked outside, but the image was too blurry to be sure. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Jake driving drunk. Jake letting his equally irresponsible friends take turns behind the wheel. Jake crashing into a tree or driving into the lake. By Sunday morning, I was a wreck of anxiety and anger. Try to eat something, Diana urged, pushing a plate of scrambled eggs toward me. You need your strength for whatever happens today. I managed a few bites, then checked my phone for the 100th time. Still nothing from Jake. But Cody had posted a new photo just minutes ago with the caption, "Heading home after an epic weekend." It showed the guys loading bags into a vehicle that was definitely my SUV. They're on their way back, I told Diana, feeling a mix of relief and renewed anger. At least the car is still in one piece from what I can see. That's good news, she said cautiously. Maybe everything will be okay after all. I wasn't convinced. Jake had already crossed so many lines, breaking into my apartment, taking my keys, stealing my car. Why would he suddenly start being responsible now? As if on cue, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Is this Ethan Carter? A male voice asked when I answered. Yes. Who's this? Officer Bennett with the Highway Patrol. I'm calling about your vehicle, a midnight blue Trailblazer SUV. My heart sank. What happened? There's been an accident, sir. Your vehicle was involved in a single-car crash on Highway 18 about 50 miles north of Pine Lake. The room seemed to tilt around me. Diana must have seen my expression change because she was instantly at my side, her hand on my shoulder. Is everyone okay? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The driver sustained non-life-threatening injuries, a broken arm, and possible concussion. He's been transported to Northside Regional Hospital. The passengers had minor injuries, mostly cuts and bruises. And my car. There was a slight pause. I'm afraid the vehicle is severely damaged, sir. It rolled several times before hitting a tree. It's being towed to the county impound lot. I closed my eyes, trying to process this information. Jake had crashed my car. My brand new 2-week-old dream car that I'd saved years for. The driver identified himself as Jake Carter, your brother, the officer continued. He claims you gave him permission to use the vehicle. That's not true, I said firmly. He took it without my knowledge or consent. Another pause. I see. Well, that's a matter you'll need to sort out. For now, you should know where to find your brother and your vehicle. After getting the exact location of the hospital and the impound lot, I thanked the officer and hung up. Diana was looking at me with concern. Jake crashed my car, I said flatly. He's in the hospital with a broken arm and concussion. The SUV is totaled. Without a word, Diana pulled me into a hug. I stood there stiffly, too numb to even cry. All that work, all that saving, all that pride, gone in an instant, because my brother couldn't respect boundaries. We should go to the hospital, Diana said after a moment. Even if you're angry, you should make sure he's okay. She was right, of course. Despite everything, Jake was still my brother, and I needed to see for myself what had happened. It's a 3-hour drive, I said. We'll need to rent a car. Diana already had her phone out. I'm on it. Pack a small bag just in case we need to stay overnight. As I mechanically threw some clothes into a duffel bag, I tried to prepare myself for what was coming, the confrontation with Jake. The inevitable excuses from my mother, who had undoubtedly already been notified. The financial nightmare of dealing with insurance, and possibly buying another car. But beneath all the practical concerns was a deeper hurt. My brother, my own flesh and blood, had so little regard for me that he would steal something I valued deeply, something I had worked years to afford. And my mother, who should have taught him better, who should have supported me as much as she supported him, would once again make excuses for his behavior. For the first time in my life, I wondered if some family ties were worth maintaining at all. The 3-hour drive to Northside Regional Hospital felt like an eternity. Diana offered to take the wheel of our rented sedan, sensing that I was in no state to drive. I stared out the window in silence, watching the scenery blur past my mind, replaying the security footage of Jake sneaking into my apartment and taking my keys. Do you want to talk about it? Diana asked gently after we'd been on the road for about an hour. What's there to say? I replied. Jake stole my car and crashed it. My mother will defend him. Nothing will change. Maybe this time will be different, Diana suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. This is pretty serious. Even your mom can't brush off a totaled car. I snorted. You don't know my mother like I do. She'll find a way to make this my fault somehow. As we neared the hospital, I received a text from my mother. At hospital with Jake. Where are you? No mention of my car. No acknowledgement that Jake had done anything wrong. Just the expectation that I would drop everything and rush to his side as always. I didn't respond. Northside Regional was a sprawling complex on the outskirts of a small town. We parked in the visitor lot, and I caught a glimpse of a tow truck pulling in with what was left of my SUV. Even from a distance, I could see the extent of the damage. The roof was crushed. The windows shattered. The beautiful midnight blue paint scraped away to reveal bare metal underneath. It was barely recognizable as the proud vehicle I'd driven off the lot just 2 weeks ago. Oh, Ethan, Diana murmured, following my gaze. I'm so sorry. I swallowed hard and turned away. Let's just get this over with. At the information desk, we learned that Jake was in a room on the 3rd floor. As we rode the elevator up, I tried to prepare what I would say to him, but my mind was a jumble of anger, hurt, and resignation. When we reached his room, I paused outside the door, taking a deep breath. Diana squeezed my hand in silent support. Then I pushed the door open. Jake was lying in the hospital bed, his right arm in a cast, a bandage on his forehead and various cuts and bruises visible on his face and arms. My mother sat beside him, holding his good hand. They both looked up as we entered, their expressions a study in contrasts. Jake's sheepish and slightly defiant, my mother's immediately defensive. Finally, my mother said, as if I was late for an appointment rather than making a 3-hour journey, I shouldn't have had to make it all. What took you so long? I ignored her, focusing on Jake. What happened? Jake shifted uncomfortably in the bed. Look, man, I'm sorry about your car. I just borrowed it for the weekend. Didn't think you'd mind that much. Didn't think I'd mind, I repeated incredulously. You broke into my apartment at 3 in the morning and stole my keys. You took my car without permission. And now you've totaled it. How exactly did you think I wouldn't mind? Ethan, my mother interjected. Now is not the time for this. Your brother is injured. And whose fault is that I shot back? If he hadn't stolen my car, he wouldn't be in that bed right now. I didn't steal it, Jake protested weakly. I asked you when you were half asleep and you mumbled something that sounded like yes. I stared at him in disbelief. That's a lie, and you know it. I have security footage of you sneaking into my apartment at 3:17 in the morning and taking my keys from my nightstand. Jake's eyes widened slightly, and I could see the moment he realized he couldn't talk his way out of this one. Okay, fine. I took the keys without asking directly. But it's not like I wasn't going to bring the car back. What happened on the road? Diana asked, her calm voice, a contrast to the tension in the room. Jake looked away. We were coming back from the cabin. The road was windy, and I guess I took a curve too fast. The car rolled a couple times before hitting a tree. Were you drinking? I asked bluntly. Jake's silence was answer enough. Jesus, Jake, drunk driving. Do you have any idea how serious that is? You could have killed yourself and your friends. Stop interrogating him, my mother snapped. He feels bad enough already. Does he? I challenged. Because all I'm hearing are excuses and lies, not an actual apology, or any sign that he understands what he did wrong. I said I was sorry about the car, Jake muttered. The car is the least of it, I said. You broke into my home. You violated my trust. You put lives at risk by driving drunk. And now you're lying about it. Look, it's not that big a deal, Jake said, his tone shifting from sheepish to defensive. Insurance will cover the car. Actually, it won't, I replied. You weren't an authorized driver on my policy. The insurance company won't pay out a cent. This was a slight exaggeration. I wasn't entirely sure what my policy would cover in this situation, but I wanted Jake to feel some of the weight of what he'd done. Jake's face fell. Oh. Well, I can help pay for it. I laughed bitterly. With what money, Jake, you can barely hold down a minimum wage job. Ethan, that's enough, my mother interrupted. We'll figure something out. Maybe you could tell the insurance company that you let Jake borrow the car. It was just an accident after all. I stared at her in disbelief. You want me to commit insurance fraud? It's not fraud if you gave him permission, she insisted. But I didn't give him permission. And I'm not going to lie and say I did. Then maybe you should have been clearer when he asked, my mother said, her voice taking on that familiar accusatory tone. You know how Jake is. Yes, I do know how Jake is, I replied. He's irresponsible, selfish, and enabled by you at every turn. He's 24 years old, Mom. When are you going to stop making excuses for him and let him face the consequences of his actions? My mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. I will not be spoken to like this. Your brother is in the hospital, and all you can think about is your precious car. My car that he stole and crashed, I reminded her. And, yes, I'm upset about the car because I worked for years to afford it. But I'm more upset about the pattern here. Jake takes what he wants, breaks it, and faces no consequences because you're always there to clean up his messes. The tension in the room was broken by a knock at the door. A nurse entered, looking uncomfortable as she sensed the hostility in the air. I need to check the patient's vitals, she said apologetically. Perhaps some of you could step outside for a few minutes. We were just leaving, I said, turning toward the door. Diana and I need to go to the impound lot to see what's left of my car. Ethan, wait, Jake called as I reached the door. I really am sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I paused, looking back at him. For a moment, I thought I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. But then he continued. Maybe when you get your insurance money, you could get something less flashy. That SUV was kind of asking to be driven, you know. All those features in that engine. And just like that, any sympathy I might have felt evaporated. In Jake's mind, this was still somehow partly my fault for having a car too tempting to resist. Goodbye, Jake, I said coldly. I'll be in touch about how you're going to pay for the damages. As Diana and I walked down the hospital corridor, she linked her arm through mine. Are you okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. For the first time in my life, I'm done letting Jake and my mother manipulate me. This ends now. What are you going to do? She asked. First, I'm going to find out exactly what my insurance covers. Then I'm going to make sure Jake understands that this time there are real consequences. No more easy forgiveness, no more letting things slide because he's family. As we left the hospital, I spotted 3 young men in the parking lot, Cody Marcus and Tyler, Jake's friends from the trip. They were huddled together looking anxious and froze when they saw me approaching. Ethan, Cody began, "We're really sorry about what happened to your car." "Were you in the vehicle when it crashed?" I asked. They nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Was Jake drinking before he got behind the wheel?" They exchanged glances, clearly reluctant to throw their friend under the bus. "The truth," I insisted. "The police report will show it anyway." "We all had a few beers," Marcus finally admitted. But Jake seemed fine to drive. The road was just really curvy, and it was getting dark. "How fast was he going?" More uncomfortable glances. "Pretty fast," Tyler eventually said. "He was showing off what the SUV could do." Those curves came up quicker than he expected. I nodded, storing this information away. "Thanks for your honesty. I suggest you guys find another way home. My brother won't be driving anyone anywhere for a long time." As Diana and I headed to the impound lot, I felt a strange sense of clarity. For years I'd been caught in this dysfunctional family dynamic, always giving in, always forgiving, always letting Jake off the hook because that's just how he is and he's family. But seeing my beautiful new car reduced to a crumpled wreck was the final straw. This time there would be consequences. This time Jake would have to grow up and take responsibility for his actions. And if my mother couldn't accept that, well, that was her problem, not mine. It was time for all of us to face reality, however painful it might be. Monday morning found me sitting in the office of Mr. Reynolds, my insurance agent, with a folder full of documentation in my lap and a knot of anxiety in my stomach. After seeing the mangled remains of my SUV at the impound lot, I had little hope that anything could be salvaged. The question now was whether insurance would cover any of the damage given the circumstances. "So let me make sure I understand the situation correctly," Mr. Reynolds said, peering at me over his reading glasses. "Your brother took your vehicle without permission, drove it while intoxicated, and crashed it, resulting in a total loss." "That's correct," I confirmed. "I have security footage showing him entering my apartment and taking the keys while I was asleep, if that helps." Mr. Reynolds nodded, making notes on a pad. "And your brother was not listed as an authorized driver on your policy?" "No, he wasn't. It was just me." "I see." He leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "Well, Mr. Carter, I won't sugarcoat this. This is a complicated situation. Standard liability coverage typically doesn't extend to unauthorized drivers, especially in cases involving theft." My heart sank. Despite my earlier words to Jake, I had been hoping that my comprehensive coverage might offer some protection. "So what you're saying is that I'm completely out of luck. I'll have to continue making payments on a car that doesn't exist anymore, plus somehow find the money to buy another vehicle?" Mr. Reynolds held up a hand. "Not necessarily. Let me review your specific policy details." He turned to his computer, typing and clicking through various screens. "You purchased this vehicle 2 weeks ago, correct?" "Yes. Barely driven at 500 miles. He continued scrolling occasionally, making small sounds that did nothing for my nerves. Finally, he turned back to me with a slightly changed expression. "Mr. Carter, when you purchased this policy, do you recall opting for the premium coverage package?" I thought back to the day I bought the car. I had been so excited to finally drive it home that I had somewhat hurriedly gone through the insurance paperwork, checking boxes and signing forms. "I think so. The dealership recommended it for new vehicles." Mr. Reynolds nodded, looking pleased. "Well, that was a fortunate decision. The premium package includes something called unauthorized driver protection. It's a special clause that extends coverage even in cases where the vehicle is driven by someone not listed on the policy, including situations involving, let's call it unauthorized borrowing, by family members. I stared at him, hardly daring to hope. Are you saying my insurance will cover the crash? Subject to verification of the circumstances, yes. The policy would cover the replacement value of the vehicle, minus your deductible of $1,000. Relief washed over me, so powerful that I had to grip the arms of my chair. I can't believe it. I thought I was going to be stuck with payments for a car I couldn't drive anymore. It's a relatively new feature we've added to our premium packages, Mr. Reynolds explained. Unfortunately, family members borrowing vehicles without permission is more common than you might think. What do you need from me to process the claim? We'll need the police report statements from you and any witnesses and that security footage you mentioned. There will be an investigation, of course, but given the evidence you've described, I don't anticipate any issues with approval. And what about the fact that Jake was drinking, I asked. Does that affect the claim? Mr. Reynolds looked uncomfortable. It might, depending on whether charges are filed. Has your brother been charged with DUI? Not yet, as far as I know. The police were focused on his injuries at the scene. Well, that's a separate legal issue between your brother and law enforcement. As for the insurance claim, the unauthorized driver protection should still apply, though there may be some additional scrutiny. As Mr. Reynolds continued explaining the claims process, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother, Jake, being discharged today. Need you to pick him up and bring him to my house, my car and shop. The audacity was breathtaking. After everything that had happened, she still expected me to drop everything and cater to Jake's needs. I typed a quick response. Can't today. Meeting with insurance about the car Jake destroyed. Suggest you call a taxi. Turning my attention back to Mr. Reynolds, I asked, how long will the claims process take? Typically 4 to 6 weeks for a total loss, but we'll try to expedite it given your situation. In the meantime, your policy includes rental car coverage. I can help you arrange that today if you'd like. By the time I left Mr. Reynolds' office, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The financial catastrophe I had feared might be avoided after all, thanks to a coverage option I had selected almost as an afterthought. As I waited for the rental car to be brought around, my phone rang. It was my mother again. Ethan, did you get my text? Jake is being discharged in an hour. Yes, I got it. And as I said, I can't pick him up. I'm dealing with the insurance company about the car he totaled. But how is he supposed to get home? I don't have a car, and he can't drive with his arm in a cast. The same way most people get places when they don't have a car, I replied. Taxi, Uber, public transportation. That's ridiculous. He's injured, and he's your brother. Yes, he's injured because he stole my car and crashed it while driving drunk. Forgive me if I'm not feeling particularly charitable toward him right now. I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath. I can't believe you're being so petty. It was an accident. The crash was an accident. The theft was not. Jake made a series of deliberate choices that led to this situation. And now he can deal with the consequences. Fine, she snapped. I'll figure it out myself as usual. But this conversation isn't over, Ethan. Actually, it is, I said firmly. At least for now. I need to focus on getting my life back in order. After the chaos Jake created. I hung up before she could respond, feeling a strange mix of guilt and liberation. For most of my life, I had been the responsible one, the brother who could be counted on to step up, to help out, to bail Jake out of whatever mess he'd created. It was a role I had accepted without question, even as it became increasingly burdensome. But standing in the parking lot of the insurance office, watching as a rental car was brought around for me, I realized something important. I didn't have to play that role anymore. I could choose to set boundaries, to protect myself, to demand respect. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, that's exactly what I intended to do. When Diana called later that evening to check on me, I was able to share the unexpected good news about the insurance coverage. That's amazing, she exclaimed. So you'll be able to replace the SUV? Eventually, yes. The process will take some time, but at least I won't be stuck with payments for a car I can't drive. And how are you feeling about everything else? Your mom, Jake. I sighed, looking around my quiet apartment. Honestly, I feel different, like something fundamental has shifted. I've spent my whole life accommodating Jake's behavior and my mother's enabling. I'm done with that. Good for you, Diana said warmly. It's about time they both recognize that their actions have consequences. Speaking of consequences, I added, I've been thinking about Jake's driving record. The police officer at the scene mentioned that they might file DUI charges once Jake was released from the hospital. Do you think they will? I don't know. But whether they do or not, I want Jake to understand how serious this was. He could have killed himself, or his friends. He needs to face real consequences this time. What are you going to do? I thought about it for a moment. I'm not sure yet. But I know one thing this time: I'm not letting my mother sweep it under the rug. This time, Jake has to grow up and take responsibility for his actions. After we hung up, I sat on my couch looking at the empty hook by the door where my car keys used to hang. For 2 weeks, I had been so proud to place those keys there, a tangible symbol of my hard work and achievement. Now they were gone along with the car they belonged to. But in their place was something unexpected. A newfound determination to change the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family for years. I couldn't control my mother's choices or Jake's behavior, but I could control my own response to them. And that, I realized, was a kind of freedom I had never fully claimed before. 3 months after the crash that destroyed my SUV, I stood in the driveway of my apartment building, admiring my new vehicle. It wasn't the same model I'd had before. I had opted for something slightly less flashy, but equally reliable, a practical decision, influenced by the ordeal I'd been through. The insurance settlement had come through faster than expected, thanks in part to the clear evidence I had provided. The security footage of Jake taking my keys, combined with the police report and witness statements from his friends, had made it an open and shut case for the insurance company. Jake, meanwhile, had faced consequences beyond anything our mother had been able to shield him from. The police had indeed filed DUI charges, resulting in a suspended license for 1-year mandatory alcohol education classes and a significant fine. The court had also ordered him to pay restitution to me for the insurance deductible and other expenses related to the crash. To everyone's surprise, including mine, Jake had accepted these consequences without the usual complaints and excuses. Perhaps the reality of seeing my totaled car, or the harsh words from the judge about how he could have killed someone, had finally broken through his sense of entitlement. My mother had struggled to adjust to this new reality. For the first few weeks after the crash, she had continued to make excuses for Jake, to suggest that I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. But as Jake himself began to acknowledge his responsibility, her position became increasingly untenable. I just wanted to protect him, she admitted during a rare, honest conversation. I always felt like you were so capable, so independent, and Jake needed more help. But by protecting him from consequences, you weren't helping him at all, I pointed out. You were teaching him that he never had to be responsible for his actions. It was a difficult truth for her to accept, but gradually I saw signs that she was trying. She stopped offering to pay Jake's fines for him. She encouraged him to find a job to cover his restitution payments. And most significantly, she stopped expecting me to be the one to clean up Jake's messes. As for Jake himself, the change was even more remarkable. He had found steady work at a local warehouse, his first job that had lasted more than a few weeks. He was attending his court-mandated classes without complaint, and he was slowly, awkwardly attempting to rebuild his relationship with me. I never really understood how much that car meant to you, he said one day when he came to deliver his monthly restitution payment. I always saw things as just things, replaceable. It wasn't just about the car, I explained. It was about respect, about recognizing boundaries, about understanding that actions have consequences. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I get that now. At least I'm trying to. The journey of healing from betrayal is rarely straightforward. There were days when the old anger would flare up, when I would remember the sight of my crumpled SUV and feel the resentment all over again. There were moments when Jake would slip into old patterns, when my mother would instinctively try to shield him from difficulty. But we were all trying in our imperfect ways to create a healthier dynamic. Diana had been my rock throughout this process, offering perspective when I was too close to the situation to see clearly, reminding me that change takes time and that perfect resolution is a myth. "It's not about erasing the past," she said wisely. "It's about building a better future." The most valuable lesson I learned from this painful experience wasn't about cars or insurance or even family dynamics. It was about the importance of standing firm in your own truth, even when those closest to you try to distort it. For years, I had allowed my mother and Jake to define reality according to their convenience, to minimize harms done to me, to prioritize Jake's needs over my boundaries. No more. I had found my voice, and I intended to keep using it. As I turned away from my new car and headed into my apartment, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. The keys in my pocket were different. The vehicle in my parking spot was different, but I was different too. Stronger, clearer about what I would and would not accept from the people in my life. Sometimes losing something valuable helps you gain something even more precious: self-respect and honest relationships based on mutual consideration rather than manipulation and enablement. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who didn't respect your property or personal space? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of family drama and hard-earned lessons resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories. Remember to share this video with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges can make all the difference. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to stand firm in your own truth, whatever that may be.